What began as a simple sandwich toss quickly turned into terror. A massive tiger shark lunged at the boat, its jaws snapping inches from the rail, leaving deep bite marks on the wood. The boat rocked violently as another shark joined, slamming into the hull with enough force to knock a woman off her feet. Tourists clutched the sides, screaming, as a third shark breached the surface, water spraying everywhere. The air was filled with fear and chaos. An adventure turned into a desperate scramble for survival. Dive into 6 terrifying shark attacks, each a chilling reminder of the ocean's raw power. The morning of February 18, 2002, was warm and clear off the coast of Cairns, Australia. A small boat bobbed gently on the Great Barrier Reef, filled with a group of eager tourists. The waters were calm and the excitement was high. Known for its diverse marine life, this part of the reef often attracted large sea creatures, including sea turtles, dolphins, and occasionally tiger sharks. Tiger sharks were among the most fearsome predators of the region, powerful, aggressive, and unpredictable. Unlike other species, they were known to approach boats, driven by their curious nature and tendency to eat almost anything. Sam Porter, a 24-year-old backpacker from England, had joined the tour on a whim. He was traveling solo across Australia, looking for adventure and stories to share with his friends back home. He was laid back, always seeking the next thrill, and often found humor in even the most serious situations. Today's tour was no different. He had come prepared with his camera and a simple lunch of sandwiches, packed by his hostel that morning. The boat, carrying about 10 tourists, left Cairns around 9 a.m., making its way toward a popular snorkeling spot. The guide, Tom, a seasoned local who had seen his fair share of marine life, explained that tiger sharks were not uncommon in these waters. The tourists were instructed to be cautious, especially if they saw a fin slicing through the surface. The boat reached its destination around 11 a.m., anchoring in a shallow part of the reef. The water was clear, offering a stunning view of the vibrant corals below. By noon, most of the tourists had returned to the boat after snorkeling. As they dried off, the group settled in for lunch. Sam, seated near the edge, was munching on a ham and cheese sandwich, occasionally glancing at the water. He spotted a large dark shadow moving beneath the surface, a telltale sign of a tiger shark. The guide confirmed its presence, explaining that the shark was likely drawn by the boat's presence, expecting scraps of fish or leftover bait. Feeling playful, Sam tore off a piece of his sandwich. With a grin, he tossed it into the water, hoping to see the shark react. The tourists watched with mixed expressions of amusement and concern. To their surprise, the shark lunged toward the sandwich, its massive jaws snapping shut with a splash. The group laughed nervously, impressed by the shark's quick response. But as they began to relax, something changed. Instead of swimming away, the shark remained near the boat. It circled slowly at first, but soon its behavior became more aggressive. It bumped the side of the boat with its nose, sending ripples across the surface. The tourists fell silent, their initial amusement turning to unease. Sam, too, felt a shift in the mood, realizing his playful act had triggered a reaction he hadn't anticipated. The tiger shark continued to circle, its movements more forceful. Each time it passed the boat, it struck harder, the impact causing the vessel to rock slightly. The tourists gripped the rails, their eyes wide with fear. The guide urged everyone to stay calm, but the tension was palpable. The shark, likely agitated by the presence of food and the splashing, was not backing down. Moments later, another shark appeared, this one slightly smaller but just as intimidating. It joined the first shark, its movements equally aggressive. The two sharks circled in tandem, bumping the boat repeatedly. The vessel, though sturdy, was beginning to rock harder. The tourists, who had been snapping photos minutes earlier, now clutched their seats, unsure of what would happen next. Sam tried to make light of the situation, but the fear in his voice was evident. The sharks seemed to sense the growing panic, their behavior becoming even more intense. A third shark arrived, drawn by the commotion. The 3 predators circled the boat, creating waves that splashed over the sides. The guide attempted to move the boat to a safer distance, but the sharks blocked the path, their bodies bumping against the hull. The boat rocked violently now, and a few of the tourists began to panic. One woman lost her grip, falling onto the deck as the boat swayed. Sam reached out to help her up, but his heart was racing. He felt a sinking guilt, knowing that his impulsive act had started this chain of events. The guide struggled to maintain control of the boat, shouting instructions as the sharks continued their relentless assault. Suddenly, one of the sharks lunged out of the water, its head breaching the surface near the edge of the boat. Its jaws snapped shut, missing the railing by inches. The tourist screamed, scrambling to move away from the side. Sam felt a surge of adrenaline as he backed up, his mind racing with fear and regret. The guide revved the engine, trying to create noise that might deter the sharks. The engine's roar seemed to have an effect as the sharks paused momentarily, circling slower but still staying close. The guide steered the boat forward, trying to put more distance between the vessel and the predators. The tourists held on to each other, their faces pale and filled with terror. Sam clung to the railing, watching the sharks with a mix of fear and fascination. As the boat finally gained some distance, the sharks began to disperse, though they remained visible below the surface. The tourists breathed a collective sigh of relief, though their bodies were still tense. Sam, shaken and silent, sat down heavily on the bench. He stared at the water, trying to process what had just happened. The once thrilling tour had turned into a nightmare, leaving everyone aboard shaken and exhausted. What had started as a light-hearted joke had nearly turned into a disaster. A sobering reminder of how quickly the ocean's predators could change the course of events. The fog was lifting over the waters of Cape Cod Bay, Massachusetts, on a crisp morning in late October 2005. James Miller, a 48-year-old fisherman from Provincetown, prepared his small trawler for another solo trip. The ocean had been his livelihood for over 2 decades, and today he was on a mission to catch something big, perhaps a large bluefish or striped bass. James, with his weathered face and strong arms, had faced rough seas and fierce storms, but nothing seemed to daunt him. By 6 a.m., the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the horizon with shades of orange. James cast off from the dock, his boat carrying the usual setup: heavy-duty rods, a box of bait, and a cooler filled with ice. The waters off Cape Cod were teeming with fish, but they also housed apex predators like great white sharks and bull sharks, which often came close to shore in search of seals and fish. James was aware of the risks, but felt confident, as he had navigated these waters for years. By 7:30 a.m., James reached a favored fishing spot known for its strong currents and abundant fish. He cast his line, hoping for a sizable catch to make the trip worthwhile. The first few hours were uneventful, yielding only a couple of small fish. James adjusted his bait and cast again, letting the line sink deeper this time. He watched the water with sharp eyes, feeling the familiar thrill of anticipation. Suddenly, there was a hard tug on the line. James felt the rod bend sharply and knew he had hooked something big. His heart raced as he began to reel it in, the resistance strong and erratic. It was heavier than the usual bluefish or bass. He braced himself against the boat's edge, keeping steady pressure on the line. The fish fought hard, making sudden pulls that tested James's strength. As James got a better look, he realized what was on the line. A young shark about 4 feet long, twisting violently in an effort to free itself. It was likely a juvenile bull shark, known for its aggressive nature even at a young age. Bull sharks were common in these waters, capable of hunting in both saltwater and freshwater. James knew he had to be cautious. Releasing a shark was tricky and dangerous. He leaned over the side, trying to get a better angle to unhook the struggling animal. He grabbed a pair of pliers, attempting to free the shark without getting too close. But the shark thrashed harder, its powerful body creating waves that splashed over the boat's edge. James held on tightly, but in a sudden twist of the line, the shark made a final, violent jerk. The force pulled James off balance, and before he could react, he was thrown overboard. The cold water shocked James's senses. His body sank momentarily before he kicked his legs to the surface. He gasped for air, trying to stay afloat while searching for his boat. To his horror, the trawler was already drifting several yards away, propelled by the strong current. James knew he had to act quickly, but panic set in as he felt the churning water beneath him. The young bull shark was still nearby, its movements erratic from the fight. It was likely disoriented and agitated, and James's splashing only made things worse. He tried to swim slowly toward the boat, keeping his movements controlled. but his heavy clothes and boots weighed him down. The cold water sapped his strength quickly, and each stroke felt more labored than the last. As James struggled, he noticed more shadows circling below. The commotion had attracted other sharks, likely drawn by the sound of splashing and the scent of the struggling juvenile. James's heart pounded as he realized the gravity of the situation. He was now surrounded by multiple sharks, each one unpredictable and potentially dangerous. He forced himself to stay calm, knowing that panic would only make things worse. James's fishing experience kicked in. He tried to minimize splashing, moving slowly toward the drifting boat, which was now about 20 yards away. But the sharks, sensing a possible meal, closed in tighter. One of the larger sharks, about 6 feet long, made a sudden approach, its dorsal fin cutting through the water toward James. He swung his arms defensively, trying to push the shark away, but it bumped him hard, knocking the wind out of him. The impact left James disoriented, and he struggled to regain his bearings. His arms and legs felt heavy, and his breathing was ragged. He knew he had to reach the boat, but the sharks were getting bolder. Another one swam closer, brushing against his leg. James kicked at it, trying to create space, but the movement only seemed to provoke the predators further. Desperate, James spotted a makeshift solution. A floating piece of driftwood nearby, possibly dislodged from his boat during the struggle. He swam toward it, hoping it could provide some support. He grabbed onto the wood, using it to keep himself above water, while trying to steer slowly toward the boat. The sharks circled relentlessly, their dark shapes visible just beneath the surface. James's muscles ached, and his body trembled from exhaustion and cold. He knew his chances were slim if he couldn't reach the boat soon. With every ounce of remaining strength, he pulled himself forward, inch by inch. The boat was still drifting, but he was slowly closing the distance. One of the sharks made another lunge, this time grazing his side. James winced in pain but forced himself to keep moving. Finally, after what felt like hours, James reached the side of the boat. He grabbed onto the edge, his fingers numb and raw. He struggled to pull himself up, his body shaking from the effort. The sharks, still circling below, made one last attempt to strike, but James managed to haul himself over the side, collapsing onto the deck. Lying on the wet floor, gasping for breath, James looked back at the water. The sharks swam below, still searching for the prey that had slipped from their grasp. James, soaked and battered, realized he had narrowly escaped what could have been a fatal encounter. The waves lapped gently against the shore as the sun started to dip lower in the sky. It was a perfect day at Grace Bay Beach in the Turks and Caicos Islands. The date was May 24, 2008, a day Chloe Hamilton and Mark Taylor would never forget. The newlyweds had just exchanged vows a few hours earlier in front of close family and friends. Now they were ready for a final set of wedding photos, this time in the ocean. Chloe and Mark felt the cool water against their legs as they waded in, still wearing their wedding clothes. Chloe's white dress floated around her as she held Mark's hand. The photographer Rachel adjusted her camera, excited to capture these unique shots. Everything felt magical, and the couple couldn't have asked for a better moment to end their special day. The Caribbean waters were known for being clear and calm, home to a variety of sea life, including sea turtles, stingrays, and reef fish. But there were also occasional sightings of reef sharks, and less frequently, tiger sharks. While shark attacks were rare, the locals often warned swimmers to stay alert, especially at dawn or dusk, when sharks tended to be more active. The photographer positioned Chloe and Mark waist-deep in the water, telling them to hold each other close and smile. Chloe felt giddy, and Mark pulled her in for a kiss, making the moment even sweeter. Everything seemed perfect, and the sound of the waves added a peaceful rhythm to the scene. As Rachel looked through her lens, she suddenly spotted something unusual in the background. Far off in the distance, a dark dorsal fin broke the surface of the water. At first, she thought it was a dolphin, which would have made for a stunning photo. She waved to Chloe and Mark, encouraging them to stay in place a little longer. But as the fin moved closer, Rachel realized it wasn't a dolphin, it was a shark. The couple, still lost in their moment, had no idea about the potential danger. The shark swam closer, its curiosity piqued by the movement and splashing. Chloe laughed as a small wave splashed her dress, not noticing the dark shape moving toward them. Mark glanced over his shoulder when he sensed Rachel's sudden change in expression. He saw the fin and felt a jolt of fear. Mark grabbed Chloe's arm, urging her to move toward shore. Confused, Chloe stumbled, her wet dress weighing her down. The shark was now only a few yards away, its fin cutting through the water with increasing speed. Mark tightened his grip on Chloe's hand, pulling her through the water as fast as he could. Chloe's heart raced as she realized what was happening. Rachel, standing on the shore, yelled frantically for the couple to hurry. The shark's approach was quick and direct, creating a sense of panic. Mark's breaths were heavy as he pushed Chloe forward, urging her to keep moving. Chloe's wet dress made it hard to move, and she struggled to lift her legs against the water's resistance. The shark swam closer, its body just visible below the surface. Mark moved to position himself between Chloe and the predator, determined to protect her. He knew they needed to reach the shallows quickly, but the shore still seemed far away. Suddenly, the shark veered, its movements sharper now, clearly interested in the splashing couple. Chloe tripped on the uneven sandy bottom, falling forward into the water. Mark pulled her up, but the delay cost them precious seconds. The shark closed the gap, its fin now just a few feet away. Chloe's fear intensified, and she struggled to keep moving, her dress tangled around her legs. Mark yelled for her to keep going, his voice filled with urgency. The shark lunged toward them, its powerful body causing a wave that nearly knocked Chloe off balance again. Mark swung his arm at the water, trying to create a distraction, hoping the splashing would deter the predator. But the shark's momentum was unstoppable, and it came within inches of Chloe's legs. Rachel watched helplessly from the shore, her camera hanging uselessly around her neck. She motioned to nearby beachgoers for help, but there was little anyone could do from the shore. The situation grew more desperate as the shark made another pass, this time brushing against Mark's leg. He felt the rough skin of the predator and knew they were running out of time. Chloe's breaths were ragged, and her legs felt weak from the effort. Mark kept pushing her forward, his body tense with fear. He could see the shallow water just ahead, but the shark was still too close. The couple made one final desperate push toward the shore, the water now only knee-deep. As they stumbled onto the sand, gasping for breath, the shark lingered at the edge of the shallow water, circling slowly before retreating back into the sea. Chloe collapsed on the sand, her heart pounding as tears streamed down her face. Mark fell beside her, wrapping his arms around her in relief. Rachel rushed over, her face pale with shock, unable to believe how quickly the photo session had turned into a life-threatening ordeal. The sun was just beginning to rise over the rugged coastline of Jeffreys Bay, South Africa, on March 12, 2010. It was a favorite spot for surfers from around the world, known for its powerful rolling waves. But for Charlie Ross, a 32-year-old seasoned surfer from Cape Town, the usual crowded beaches were starting to feel a bit mundane. He craved something more, a hidden, untouched break where he could ride waves alone, away from the usual chaos. Charlie had heard whispers of a secluded beach about an hour's hike from the main surf spots. Local surfers had warned him about the dangers: jagged rocks, unpredictable currents, and most importantly, sharks. Great whites were known to patrol these waters, especially in the early morning and late afternoon. Charlie, however, was not one to back down from a challenge. He believed his years of surfing had prepared him for any situation. He packed his board, a small bottle of water, and set off toward the uncharted spot. The hike was rugged, with rocky paths and steep cliffs overlooking the ocean. It was a quiet morning, with only the sound of the waves crashing in the distance. Charlie finally reached the hidden beach, a narrow stretch of sand surrounded by rocks. It was exactly what he had hoped for. No other surfers in sight, just the open water and the promise of untouched waves. Excited, Charlie waxed his board, adjusted his leash, and waded into the cool water. He paddled out quickly, the familiar rhythm of his strokes bringing a sense of calm. The waves were promising, with strong swells building in the distance. Charlie caught the first wave perfectly, carving through the water with a mix of speed and control. He let out a triumphant shout as he rode it all the way to the shore, then paddled back out for more. For the next half hour, everything went smoothly. Charlie caught wave after wave, feeling the rush of adrenaline with each ride. But as he sat on his board waiting for the next set, he noticed a change in the water around him. There was a sudden, eerie stillness. The usual fish darting below had vanished, leaving an unsettling silence beneath the surface. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Charlie saw it. A large, dark shadow moving slowly beneath him. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized the outline of a great white shark, its massive body gliding through the water with ominous grace. Great whites were apex predators, known for their curiosity and unpredictable behavior. They often approached surfers, drawn by the splashing that resembled the movements of seals, their natural prey. Charlie tried to stay calm, knowing that panic would only worsen the situation. He kept his movements slow, hoping the shark would lose interest and swim away. But the predator seemed fixated, circling beneath him with increasing intensity. Charlie's mind raced with options. He could try to paddle back to shore, but the sudden movements might trigger an attack. He could also wait and hope the shark would move on. But every second felt like an eternity. The shark made a sudden sharp turn toward Charlie's board, its fin cutting through the surface. Charlie felt a surge of fear but tried to maintain his balance. He knew he couldn't afford to fall into the water. He slowly turned his board toward the shore, trying to create a small, gradual motion. The shark followed, its movements quicker and more direct now. Charlie felt his arms grow heavy from the tension, but he knew he had to stay focused. The waves were building behind him, offering a potential escape. He waited for the right moment, then paddled hard, trying to catch the wave and ride it back to the beach. The shark, sensing the sudden splashing, accelerated toward him. Charlie caught the wave, riding it with all his strength, but the shark kept pace, its fin dangerously close. As the wave carried him forward, Charlie could see the shallow water ahead. He knew he needed to make a split-second decision. Should he try to reach the shore quickly, risking a potential attack in the shallow water, or stay in the deeper area where he could maneuver more easily? He chose to ride the wave as far as he could, hoping the speed would deter the shark. The wave began to lose momentum as Charlie approached the shallows. He jumped off his board, landing in waist-deep water. The shark was still there, its dark shape clearly visible beneath the surface. Charlie stumbled forward, his legs feeling weak and unsteady. He tried to keep his movement steady, knowing that a sudden fall could be disastrous. The shark made another pass, its body brushing against Charlie's leg. He felt the rough skin graze him, sending a jolt of fear through his body. He pushed forward, his eyes fixed on the beach just a few yards away. He could hear the pounding of his heart in his ears, the adrenaline keeping him moving despite the exhaustion. As Charlie reached the edge of the water, he felt a sudden tug on his leash. The shark had bitten the end of his surfboard, pulling it back with force. Charlie stumbled, nearly losing his footing, but managed to unclip the leash from his ankle. He left the board behind, sprinting toward the sand with everything he had left. The shark lingered at the edge of the water for a moment, its fins still visible as it circled the abandoned board. Charlie collapsed onto the sand, gasping for breath, his body shaking with relief and fear. He looked back at the water, unable to believe he had made it back alive. The hidden beach, once a symbol of adventure, had turned into a place of terror. Charlie, still catching his breath, realized how close he had come to being another statistic in the dangerous waters of Jeffreys Bay. The boat rocked gently as it anchored near the vibrant reefs of the Maldives on August 5, 2012. It was a sunny morning, perfect for exploring the underwater world that made this place famous. Emma Brooks, a 29-year-old traveler from Canada, was on her dream vacation. She had always wanted to snorkel in these waters, known for their colorful coral gardens, schools of fish, and occasional sightings of sea turtles. This trip was meant to be the highlight of her visit. Emma and a small group of tourists, about 8 in total, listened carefully to their guide, Naveen, as he gave final instructions. Naveen was an experienced local who had guided countless tours through the reefs. He explained that these waters were also home to reef sharks, which were usually curious but not aggressive. He reminded everyone to stay calm if they saw a shark, as sudden movements could provoke them. Emma, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves, adjusted her mask and snorkel, preparing for the adventure ahead. The group slid into the warm, clear water one by one. Emma felt a rush of adrenaline as she dipped her face beneath the surface, her eyes immediately captivated by the bright corals below. Schools of small, colorful fish swam past, glittering in the sunlight that filtered through the water. Emma swam close to Naveen, feeling reassured by his presence as he pointed out the different types of marine life. She noticed parrotfish nibbling on the coral, clownfish darting in and out of anemones, and even a sea turtle gliding gracefully in the distance. Everything seemed peaceful as the group drifted over the reef, staying close together. Emma felt a sense of wonder, mesmerized by the beauty around her. But that tranquility was soon shattered. As they approached a larger coral formation, a sudden burst of movement caught Emma's eye. Naveen pointed toward a dense school of fish darting around the reef. But the fish weren't moving randomly. They were fleeing. Emma's heart raced as she spotted a dark, sleek shape cutting through the water. It was a reef shark, about 5 feet long, and it moved with quick, deliberate strokes. The shark seemed more interested in the fleeing fish than the snorkelers, but its sudden appearance caused a ripple of panic among the group. Emma felt a surge of fear, but she remembered Naveen's advice. Stay calm, keep movements slow, and avoid drawing attention. However, not everyone followed the guide's instructions. 2 tourists, visibly panicked, started to kick and thrash in the water, trying to swim back toward the boat. The sudden splashing caught the shark's attention, and it turned toward the group, circling closer. Emma felt her chest tighten as more sharks appeared, drawn by the erratic movement. There were now at least 3 sharks circling, their curious behavior turning into something more intense. Emma tried to keep her breathing steady, focusing on slow, controlled movements. She glanced around and saw Naveen trying to signal the others to calm down, but the panic was spreading. One snorkeler accidentally bumped into another, causing even more splashing. The sharks closed in, their movements quick and precise. Emma could see their eyes, dark and focused, as they swam closer to the group. Emma's instincts screamed at her to swim faster, but she knew that would only worsen the situation. She tried to remain as still as possible, her body tense with fear. She watched as one of the sharks swam just a few feet below her, its body brushing past her flippers. Emma felt a surge of terror but forced herself to stay still, hoping the shark would lose interest. The situation grew more dangerous as one of the tourists, a middle-aged man with little snorkeling experience, lost control. He flailed his arms wildly, trying to grab onto another snorkeler for support. The sudden movement sent waves through the water, and one of the sharks made a sharp turn toward him. The man's mask slipped off and he gasped for air, causing even more splashing. Emma knew she had to act. She swam toward the man slowly, trying to avoid sudden movements. She reached out, taking his arm gently, trying to steady him. The man clung to her, his grip tight and desperate. Emma felt the weight of panic in the water, knowing that their actions could trigger an attack at any moment. The sharks, now numbering 5, circled tighter. Emma felt one bump against her leg, its rough skin scraping her lightly. She fought back the urge to kick, knowing that any aggressive movement could be disastrous. She could feel the tension in the water, the shark's curiosity turning into something more sinister. Naveen was still trying to signal for calm, but the chaos was too intense. Emma looked up briefly, trying to locate the boat. It was only about 50 feet away, but it felt like miles. She tried to guide the panicking man slowly toward the boat, keeping her movements as controlled as possible. The other tourists were doing their best to stay calm, but the presence of so many sharks was overwhelming. Suddenly, one of the sharks lunged forward, its body twisting sharply in the water. Emma felt a rush of fear, her heart pounding in her chest. The shark's sudden movement sent a ripple of panic through the group, causing more splashing. Emma tightened her grip on the man's arm, trying to keep him steady as they inched toward the boat. The sharks were now agitated, their movements faster and more unpredictable. One swam directly at Emma, veering off at the last second, its tail brushing against her side. Emma felt a surge of panic but kept moving slowly. She could see the boat getting closer and she focused all her energy on reaching it. The guide, Naveen, was now swimming alongside Emma, trying to guide the group toward safety. Emma felt a brief sense of relief but knew they weren't out of danger yet. The sharks continued to circle, their dark shapes closing in as the group made their way toward the boat. Emma's muscles burned from the effort and her breathing was rapid through the snorkel. With one final push, Emma reached the side of the boat. She helped the panicking man grab onto the ladder, and then she pulled herself up, her body shaking with exhaustion. The others followed quickly, scrambling onto the deck as fast as they could. Naveen was the last to climb aboard, keeping an eye on the water until everyone was safe. Emma collapsed onto the deck, gasping for breath. She looked back at the water, seeing the shark still circling below. The once beautiful reef now seemed dark and menacing, a reminder of how quickly the ocean's calm could turn dangerous. Emma's heart still raced, but she knew she had survived. It had been a close call, a reminder of the unpredictable power of the sea. The Gulf of Mexico was calm on August 22, 2015, as the boat anchored off the coast of Galveston, Texas. Ethan Lewis, a 35-year-old underwater photographer, prepared his gear on the deck. He was no stranger to these waters, having spent over a decade capturing marine life. Ethan was after one of his most ambitious shots yet, an up-close encounter with sharks. Today's dive would take him deep into shark territory, where sandbar and bull sharks were often found patrolling. Bull sharks in particular were known for their aggressive nature and tendency to swim in shallow waters, making them one of the more dangerous species. Ethan's day had started early, waking before dawn to review his equipment. His heavy-duty underwater camera, a backup oxygen tank, and a reinforced wetsuit. He felt a mix of excitement and tension. The Gulf's waters were clear that morning, a perfect setting for capturing sharks in their element. Ethan was focused on getting the kind of shot that would bring his name even more recognition in the world of wildlife photography. By mid-morning, Ethan and the boat crew reached a prime diving spot, known among local divers as the Pit. It was famous for its dense schools of fish and, of course, sharks. Ethan slipped into his gear and adjusted his mask and regulator. He was the only diver going down, as he preferred to work alone when photographing potentially aggressive species. He gave a thumbs up to the crew and then descended slowly into the water, his camera clutched tightly. Ethan's descent was smooth, the water warm and clear as he reached about 40 feet deep. He saw small fish darting around him, their bright colors contrasting against the deep blue background. Ethan moved carefully, scanning the area for any sign of sharks. His camera was ready, set to capture high-definition shots. It didn't take long for the first shark to appear. A large sandbar shark, gliding silently just a few feet below. Ethan steadied himself, bringing the camera up to frame the shot. The shark swam slowly, its movements calm and controlled. Ethan got closer, clicking his camera as he captured a series of photos. He felt a rush of satisfaction. These were the images he had come for. But as Ethan continued photographing, more sharks appeared. He counted 3 bull sharks circling at a distance. Bull sharks were bulkier than the sandbar shark, with a reputation for unpredictable behavior. Ethan kept his breathing steady, knowing that sudden movements could trigger aggression. He adjusted his position, trying to get a better angle as one of the bull sharks swam closer. Ethan's focus was intense. He was completely absorbed in the moment, framing each shot with precision. He floated forward, trying to capture a frontal shot of a shark coming straight toward him. But in his effort to get closer, Ethan misjudged the distance. His fin brushed against the side of one of the bull sharks. The reaction was immediate. The shark turned sharply, its body twisting in the water as it whipped around to face Ethan. The sudden movement sent a ripple of tension through the water, and Ethan's heart raced. He knew he had made a critical mistake. Sharks could interpret even a light bump as a sign of aggression. Ethan tried to back away slowly, keeping his camera between him and the shark. But the bumped shark seemed agitated, and its quick, jerky movements drew the attention of the others. The group of sharks, which had been circling at a safe distance, now closed in, their behavior more aggressive. Ethan found himself surrounded by at least 5 sharks, their dark eyes fixed on him. Ethan gripped his camera tighter, using it as a makeshift shield. The sharks swam closer, their movements swift and purposeful. One of the bull sharks lunged forward suddenly, bumping Ethan's camera with its snout. Ethan felt the impact reverberate through his hands. He tried to keep his breathing calm, but fear was creeping in fast. The sharks circled tighter, their sleek bodies brushing past Ethan as they tested his presence. He felt a jolt as one shark bumped his side, its rough skin scraping against his wetsuit. Ethan swung his camera toward the shark, hoping to create some distance. The shark backed off slightly, but another one approached from behind, forcing Ethan to turn quickly. Ethan's movements were becoming more frantic. He knew he needed to retreat to the surface, but the sharks were too close, blocking his path. He tried to move slowly upward, his eyes darting between the sharks as he planned his next move. But each time he tried to ascend, the sharks responded with more aggressive circling. Suddenly, one of the sharks made a sharp lunge at Ethan's leg. He swung his camera down, using it as a barrier to push the shark away. The impact was hard, and Ethan felt his body twist from the force. His oxygen regulator slipped from his mouth momentarily, causing him to gulp a mouthful of seawater. He quickly resecured the regulator, coughing slightly as he tried to regain control. Ethan's situation was growing more desperate. His oxygen supply was running low, and the sharks showed no sign of losing interest. He was trapped in a dangerous standoff, his camera the only thing keeping the predators at bay. Another shark lunged, this time from the side, its teeth bared as it tried to bite the camera. Ethan swung the camera with both hands, managing to deflect the attack, but the movement sent him spinning sideways. Ethan struggled to right himself, his muscles aching from the effort. He could see the boat far above, the surface of the water rippling in the sunlight. He knew he had to make a break for it, despite the risk. He adjusted his camera strap, securing it tightly around his wrist, and prepared to kick upward as fast as he could. With a sudden burst of energy, Ethan pushed off from the sea floor, kicking hard toward the surface. The sharks followed immediately, their sleek bodies slicing through the water with alarming speed. Ethan swung his camera repeatedly, trying to keep them at a distance. He felt another jolt as one of the sharks brushed past his arm, its tail slapping him hard. Ethan's lungs burned as he kicked faster, his vision narrowing with the need for air. He was just a few feet from the surface now, but the sharks were still in pursuit. He could see the crew on the boat above, pointing and shouting as they tried to help. Ethan reached for the boat's ladder, his fingers grazing the metal. In a final, desperate move, Ethan pulled himself up onto the ladder, his body shaking with exhaustion. The sharks lingered below, circling the boat as if waiting for another chance. Ethan collapsed onto the deck, gasping for air, his body trembling from the adrenaline and fear. He looked down at his camera, still clutched tightly in his hand. What was meant to be the shot of a lifetime had turned into a fight for survival, a reminder of the unpredictable and dangerous world beneath the waves.